Welcome to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this podcast is your guide to start creating a lifestyle by design. From entrepreneurship, money and finance, tax optimization and residencies, and everything in between, this show highlights the nuances of a true global citizen lifestyle. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the podcast, and in today's episode, I sit down with David Andrews. Now, David is an expert in all things immigration specific to the country of New Zealand. So in this episode, we really dive into the immigration details, how you can gain residency, how you can potentially work your way toward citizenship, and also we touch on real estate and, of course, taxation within New Zealand. So if you are interested in immigrating to New Zealand in the near future, then this is the episode for you. Let's dive in.
I'm David Andrews. I was originally born in the UK, and I came to New Zealand in 1990. Living in the UK, I always wanted to go to New Zealand or Australia, and it was very, very difficult at that time to get here. So I just got on a plane and came here. I just came here and been here ever since, and love the country. When I first came here, when I was in the UK, I was in the Royal Navy as an engineer. When I came here, I started work as an engineer. And then I worked into IT. And 7 years ago, I made the decision as I was getting older that I want a job where I can work at home. And I did some additional study for 2 years and obtained my license as an immigration advisor. In New Zealand, to practice immigration, you have to be licensed by the government, and it's a very strict, and that is to give migrants the security, knowing that if they're dealing with immigration advisors, that we are a licensed body, so we can be trusted to look after their funds and give them good advice.
So, before we dive into the pathways to immigration, I'm curious what really drew you to New Zealand and then what has kept you there for so long.
So, being in the forces, I have traveled a lot, and I had seen pretty much all of the UK multiple times, and I ran out of places that I wanted to view. I wanted to go to a country that was English speaking and had a low population, and it wasn't a lot of people. When I came here in 1990, the population of New Zealand was 3 million, and now we are 5 million. So we are growing. New Zealand, for those who don't know, is composed of two main islands. We have the North Island and we have the South Island. The North Island has Auckland, which is the biggest city, and 2/3 of the population live in Auckland. The South Island, where I live in Christchurch in the South Island, and the population down here is obviously quite small, but with the same size as the North Island. And I like living here because there's lots of open spaces. Property is much cheaper than in the North Island. The land that you get when you buy a piece of property is much 2 or 3 times the size. Prices are cheaper. And I like to go out driving my car and being out in the open, and there's nobody here. You can go down to the beach for a walk and you'll be on your own. So I like that. I like not being in the big city with thousands and thousands of people. If you want that, move to Auckland.
So, Auckland, in and of itself, is it really a big city or is it more of I don't know. I've never been to New Zealand, so I'm curious what that's like and what type of person, even if you're a city person, maybe you might gravitate more toward Auckland because it's city, but maybe it's smaller city, more forested areas. I'm curious what that would look like for somebody interested in moving there.
So we have a sort of clean and green image for New Zealand, and even though Auckland is a big city, comparable with Sydney in Australia, Melbourne in Australia, in the States, I would say, where would it be comparable with? Hard to say. Nowhere near as big as New York. Maybe the size of Miami, if you're comparable with it. Most people drift to Auckland because that's where all the jobs are. The government is based in Wellington. There's a lot of government jobs in Wellington, but most people drift to Auckland or arrive in Auckland because That's where the biggest companies are, and that's where the jobs are. And also, a lot of migrants like to go there because there are lots of migrant communities there. There is a big South African community there. There's a lot of Asian communities there. So they tend to want to go to the big city, and they come from a big city, so they feel more comfortable in the big city. The good schools are there, the jobs are there, the infrastructure is there. So that's why 2/3 of people live there. But that has a negative impact on migration because houses are rare, hard to find rental properties, and the prices are driven up crazy because everybody wants to live there, and there just isn't. It's small. You got the ocean on either side of it, and then there's not a lot of places to build, so prices are quite high.
Can you give us an idea of pricing and what the market is, if you know what that would look like in somewhere like Auckland and then somewhere more rural, maybe where you are?
So in Auckland, the median price is about $1 million New Zealand dollars for a house, maybe a 3-bedroom house. And that's Auckland is based up of the central city and lots of suburbs around the city. There's inner suburbs and outer suburbs. The further away you go from the city, the cheaper the prices get. But they're still around $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 for a average 3-bedroom house on not a lot of land. Some of the places in inner city that have the amazing views of the ocean, you could be paying $2, $3, $4 million for a big house. In Christchurch, where I live, $1 million will buy you a very, very large house and a very, very big piece of land. So that's what the major difference is. For approximately 600,000 down here, you can get a house that's twice the size of one you'd buy. And the further south you go, if you go right to the bottom of the South Island, you can buy a house for $200,000 or $300,000. So it's the same for any major cities around the world. You want to be central city in New York, you're paying a huge premium.
It's always good to know the prices just to compare to different markets. I travel a lot, so I'm always very curious what pricing is, usually within Latin America. So it's a very different market from where you are. And are loans, mortgages, something that many residents have access to, or are those rates just too high?
The mortgage rate right now is about 5%. And because of the shortage of properties and the lending rules, the banks require 20% deposit. So that has a very big impact on, especially young people and who have just left university or early in their career, to save. If the median price is $1 million, you need $200,000 deposit on a house. Most people will find that very, very hard to save. So unless you've got good parents or you've got some support, getting that first deposit on a house is very, very, very hard to save up. That's why people come out to the South Island, where you can buy a house for $300,000 and you only need $60,000 deposit, for example.
Okay, so let's dive into some immigration. So, what are some of the main ways that you see many of your clients and just many applicants in general coming into the country via which immigration methods?
So obviously there's visitor visas and there are visa waiver countries. If you come from the US, Canada, certain countries around the world, you can have an e-visa. So as long as you don't have criminal convictions, you can go online, get an e-visa, coming as a tourist. I don't generally see those types of people because they do that themselves. And it's very inexpensive to get $20, $30 to get an e-visa. And you can come to New Zealand for 3 or 4 months. If people want to come and stay longer, they want to travel around New Zealand for a year or so, they may approach me and say, "Hey, David, we'd like to come and see New Zealand and stay here longer. Can we apply for a visitor visa, not an e-visa?" So I will help them in that aspect. The majority of my work, I would say 75% of my work, is work visas. The main entry into New Zealand is you come here and you work, and depending on your skills, your qualifications, the type of job you have, you may have a pathway to residence. So people either come here and they study and then they work and then they get to residency. Most of the questions that I get asked the most is, how do I become a resident? People want to know that if they migrate to this country, they want the security of becoming a resident. So we have two types of visas. We have temporary visas and we have permanent visas. So a visitor visa, a work visa, they are all temporary visas. They can expire and then you have to leave. Some people think, oh, I'll go to New Zealand and I'll work for 2 or 3 years, and then lose their job. Then they don't have a visa. Then if they don't get another job, then they've got to leave. So that can be, people don't think about that sometimes. They come here from South Africa, they sell their house, they have a job, that company goes bankrupt, and then they're sitting here with no visa. So that people really want to know, do I have a pathway to residence? So that's what I do a lot of, is looking at their circumstances, look at their qualifications, and advise them, yes, if you do come here and you do this, there's a good chance that you have that pathway.
What does that pathway look like, or what are the different options? Is it a point system? Is it you have to be in the country working or qualifying under the temporary for X amount of years? What does that look like?
So we had a recent shake-up of the immigration system recently, and we now have a couple of options. One is the skilled migrant category, which is a points-based system. You get 6 points, and then you can apply for residency. And those points are based on work experience, qualifications, and the amount of money that you're earning for your job. And we also have another category, which is on the green list. We are short of a large number of different types of professionals. We have a green list. If you go to Immigration New Zealand website and search green list, there's tier 1 and tier 2. Most of the tier 1 jobs are straight to residency. That is designed for, just say you are a doctor in the UK or in Argentina or wherever you are, and you want to come to New Zealand, you know that you have a immediate path to residency. So that makes coming to New Zealand a much more better option for you if you want to come to New Zealand. You know that once you arrive, you've got that pathway. That is to attract talent, doctors, nurses, certain types of construction workers. There is a big skill shortage in New Zealand of those types of people. We have a problem here because we're so far away from everywhere. When students go to university and they qualify as doctors or whatever, they go overseas because they can earn more money and they want to travel. So if they take their experience and they go to the UK or they go to America or they go to Australia, then we're not bringing the people in to fill up those people who are retiring and leaving the professions. So we have that big skills gap. So there is a big drive to bring in skilled professionals.
I didn't know that there was a brain drain, I guess, in the country and they don't usually come back. So a lot of the clients that you work with, are they skilled professionals who know that this is an option and they're wanting to take advantage of that and live long term or forever in the country and work their way towards citizenship?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people. I mean, the brain drain is because wages are quite low compared with other places around the world. A nurse in New Zealand may be earning $70,000 a year, and she can go to Australia and earn $90,000 a year, or she can go to the States and double that. So we have a good reputation for education and highly skilled people, but those people generally may have a student loan, that they paid for their study. They will go overseas and they will come back, but they will come back in 5 or 10 or 15 years' time when they've made a lot of money overseas, come back, buy a house, and then work in New Zealand. So, yeah, a lot of people from overseas will see this as an opportunity. Hey, I can come to New Zealand. And another benefit is if you live in a country that's quite wealthy and you're in the US, you've got $1 equals $2 in New Zealand. You sell your house in the UK for £1 million, you've got £3 million when you come to New Zealand. So there are those other incentives to come here that your money goes a lot further. But you also have to think then, okay, my money goes a lot further, but I'm going to be earning a lot less.
Interesting ways to maximize money if you're thinking smart about it. So you mentioned about the skilled worker visa. What are some other visas that you see many clients of yours coming in on? Are you looking to become a diversified global citizen? If this is a lifestyle that you're seeking to create, we can help. Whether it be multiple residencies, citizenships, bank accounts, trusts, or company formations, we operate in 30 plus of the most tax friendly jurisdictions around the globe to get you structured properly. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more and to get your global citizen journey underway today.
The biggest visa in New Zealand is called the accredited employer work visa. That work visa is, if you are an employer, you have to first of all be accredited by the government to recruit migrants. So just say, for example, you have a painting company and you want to bring in 5 painters, and you advertise for painters in New Zealand and you can't find any. You can then apply for permission to bring in painters, and that involves submitting to Immigration New Zealand for a job check, and you have to meet certain criteria, that you're going to provide employment, that it's going to be full time, that it's going to be above the median wage, and then you get these tokens, and those tokens are, you can give to migrants to apply for a visa. So you do some advertising and you get a client in the Philippines who wants to come to New Zealand as a painter. You can issue that job token to him and he can come to New Zealand based on that token. Generally, they will get a 5-year visa. The problem with that system is it's designed for not the high skilled people, and there generally isn't a pathway to residency. So they come here for 3 to 5 years, and at the end of that time, at 5 years overseas is a lot of time in a country. You've rented a house, you've got your family here, their kids are going to the schools, and then you think, okay, I don't have the qualifications or the skills or the experience to be able to get a resident visa. Now what? So it's designed to bridge a gap of labor shortage, but not to keep them staying here full time, because that is a drain on the resources, affects infrastructure, affects housing, affects schooling. So it's a bit of a juggling act.
Yeah, interesting, the pros and cons there. And you mentioned to me off air as well an investor visa. What does that option look like?
So we have some investment visas. I mean, some people who retire or want to get into business in New Zealand can basically buy a visa. If you have $15 million or $5 million or $3 million, there are different types of investment visa. You have to invest in stocks or bonds, or there's a whole criteria around what your investment has to be in. And that investment visa, as long as you maintain that investment for the criteria, however long the time says, depending on the amount of your investment, then you will get a resident visa at the end of that time frame. It's a complicated process, and especially for people coming from countries where financial records are hard to prove. The biggest issue that I have as an immigration advisor is to prove where the funds come from. So immigration, if you're investing $15 million or $10 million or whatever you're investing, immigration want to see the money trail. That this is to do with anti-money laundering and all that sort of stuff, which is quite important. So yeah, if you're saying I've sold a house, you need to prove that you've owned that house and you paid the mortgage for the last 10 years, or your grandmother left you $200,000 in her will. So it's got a lot of work to show the money trail to get your entrepreneur type visa.
And is the purchase of any sort of property in the country something that would qualify toward that visa?
You can buy property, but you can't live in it. It has to be. You can build property. So just say you come over here to New Zealand and and you have quite a bit of money and you build 6 houses. That's obviously helping New Zealand economy because you're building some houses, and that can be seen as a type of investment. You can invest in companies. You can buy into companies, and there are some options for investing in startups, and you actually get more points for investing in startups because you're helping the economy grow. It's very, very complicated, and I maybe do one a year because it's a lot of work, and you have to tick lots of boxes.
And what about a potential retirement visa option?
Retirement visa, we have a couple of options. If you have family here, just say that the wife is a New Zealander and the husband is American, and they live here, and the husband wants to bring his parents to New Zealand. They can do that, and they can sponsor them to come here, and that is subject to meeting the criteria of your income. So there's an income threshold for bringing in your parents, and if one of you is supporting the parent or both of you supporting the parent, there's a table that states how much you need to be earning, and you need to prove that to immigration to be able to bring in one or two of your parents. So that is one option. The other option is a retirement visa where you can stay here for, I think it's 5 years, where you have a sum of money that you put in. I haven't done one for a long time, but I can find that out. You put money in, and you keep that money there, and as long as that money's there in 5 years' time, then you can apply for another one. So you have to keep applying for it. It's not a forever visa. So that is available, but I do that very, very rarely. Maybe one a year, maybe one every 2 years. For people who want to, it's for people who want to spend some time here, but still have ties to their home country. It enables you to live here, but sort of semi-permanently.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like the best long-term option, I guess, if you're always having to renew it or just keep the money. I'm curious how it works for taxation. We're talking about a Western country here, so I know it's not low, but how does it work when somebody enters the system? They're planning on living longer term in New Zealand and not living in their home country. How does that work in terms of taxation? And what does that look
So
like?
if you're working, your tax is based on your income, and the more you earn, the more you pay. I think the base rate is about 20%, and the highest rate is about 40%. So, yeah, I lived in Miami for a while, and I didn't pay any tax, which I loved. I mean, right now I have a decent wage, and every dollar I earn, I give 40 cents to $40 to the. I earn 100, I keep 60, and that hurts. I mean, it's quite high. That's we have an aging population, and we have a government that obviously provides benefits to people. If you're sick, you can go to hospital. If you don't have a job, the government will assist you. We have a good social welfare system. Obviously, that needs to be paid for. We have free healthcare, free schooling. So that all comes at a cost. So your taxation is quite high comparing with some countries. You pay tax on your income and your investments. So you put $1,000 in the bank, you will get the interest on that, but you pay tax on that business, on that interest. We don't have capital gains tax. Some people in the government want to bring it in, but they're fiercely opposed. So right now, if you sell your property, there is no capital gains tax, but it's just the way it is. I mean, taxes, taxes, yeah, you can't avoid it.
So, speaking about that, I'm curious up to what level of education is we're going to say free or included in the tax dollars, and how is the healthcare system in terms of wait times, the level of service that you get? What does that look like?
So schooling in New Zealand, children start school on their 5th birthday. So they start school when they're 5. They have primary school, intermediate school, and high school. And most students will stay in high school till they're about 17 or 18. That's free education, unless you want to go to a private school. I mean, there are a number of private schools in New Zealand, but we have a good quality education system. One of the problems we have is we have a zoning system. So if you live in the zone, you get to go to the school. So I'll give you an example. In Auckland, there are two very, very good schools, Auckland Boys Grammar School and Auckland Girls Grammar School. They are two of the top schools in Auckland. All migrants, especially a lot of Asians, want their children to go to those schools. And to go to those schools, you have to live in the zone, which is an area defined around the school where you can go to it. So house prices in the zones are out of proportion to other places, and because you have to be living in the zone when you do the enrollment. So that has a big effect on education. The high zones are the most popular schools and hard to get into unless you live there. So that has an impact. But it is free unless you choose to go to a private school, which there are a number of. Once you leave school and if you go to university, the government used to pay for the first year of your study. And they've changed that recently, and they will pay for the last year of your study. So that is to give you more of an incentive to actually complete your course. A lot of people were doing the first, second year, then dropping out. So you have to pay for your own fees and your own living costs when you are going to university. But we do have student loans and student allowances. So the government will fund your education. They will help you with money for accommodation. They will pay your course fees and course-related costs. But that is a loan. It's interest-free loan. And a lot of people actually take advantage of it, even if they can afford it, because why use your own money? Use the government money. But you can do, depending on your course, you do 3, 4, 5-year, 6-year course, you can have a huge debt at the end of that. That is then, as I spoke about before, that is when they all go overseas because they want to earn money to pay off the student debt and earn more money than they would earn if they remained in New Zealand.
I think that is an interesting system, especially paying for the last year of education. I've never heard of that before. Good incentive. What about the healthcare system? How good, bad, mediocre is that?
Right now, it is under pressure. It's very much under pressure, especially in the big cities. I live in the South Island, and I live in a nice area. And if I go online now, it will take me maybe a week to get a quote with my GP. I wouldn't be able to see him today if I was sick. If I was very, very sick, I would go to the hospital and I would be seen. Healthcare is free in New Zealand. You enroll with your local clinic, depending on where you live. Hospital treatment is free. There are long waiting lists for minor surgery. I mean, if you have a lump on your head and you want it removed, you're on a long wait list. If you want hip replacement and it's not life-threatening, you may be waiting for a year or more. There are a few private hospitals in here. People will have health insurance if they want as well. And obviously, if you have health insurance, you will go straight to the top of the queue because it's getting paid for. You will often use the same doctor that's working in the public system to do the private operation for you, but that's funded. But obviously, health insurance comes at a cost. Some companies who you work for will include health insurance, but not the lower paid ones. The higher paid salaries, to make it more attractive, they will include health insurance. The system is good. I had a back problem recently, and my GP sent me for an MRI, and the MRI booking only took 3 days to go and have an MRI. And then part of that, I get to see a physiotherapist. So, and there are some surcharges on some small things, but generally we have a good public healthcare system.
MRI in 3 days, I mean, that's not terrible. Of course, some longer surgeries like hip, knee replacement, I find most Western countries do take a while, if not a bit longer. But that's good to know. I always like to know what those average times are. let's talk about my last question for you. We're kind of jumping around
Okay.
here as we're speaking is citizenship. So what does it look like in order to work your way toward citizenship?
So citizenship in New Zealand, some people can have dual citizenship once they get it, depending on what's available in their own country. I'm English. I have an English passport and I have a New Zealand passport because we have the same monarch. It was the Queen, and now we have the King. So we had dual citizenship. To get citizenship, you have to be a resident for 5 years, and then you can apply for citizenship as long as you meet the criteria. And what trips up a lot of people is they get their resident visa and they get their permanent resident visa, then they go home for a little while, and they go home for a long while. Once you've got your permanent resident visa, you can go back to your home country for 2 or 3 years. Your permanent resident visa is permanent. It means you can come back. When you go to apply for your citizenship, they will ask you, have you met the living in New Zealand criteria, which I think is about 184 days a year. And they will look at your 5-year time span and they will say, okay, in the 5-year time span, have you met the living in New Zealand criteria for that time? And they add it all up and you haven't. So you've got to spend more time. So that is a bit of a trap. You have to make sure that once you get your resident visa, and it's in 2 stages. We have the first visa you get is a resident visa. You have to keep that resident visa for 2 years to get a permanent resident visa. And then you can get 3 years more after that, apply for your citizenship. So the whole process can take 5 to 7 years, depending on where you start off. If you come into the country as a doctor or a nurse or a technician that goes straight to resident visa, you're obviously cutting that time down to get your citizenship.
That's actually a lot quicker than I expected. We do a lot of citizenships in Caribbean and Latin America specifically, and usually the wait times are anywhere from 3 to 4 years minimum with processing times, up to even 10 years. So five, once you, I guess, if you initially go to that resident visa and you're not just on a visitor visa, I don't think that's terrible actually. But of course, they want you to be in their tax system for the 184 days and then make sure that you're staying there and paying tax to the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much the tax system, it's actually making a commitment to New Zealand. If you want to be a citizen of the country, we have to make sure that, New Zealand is your home. It's where you not to be a citizen, not get the citizenship so you can go back to America and live there for 5 years. And when things turn to custard, you've got somewhere you can run to. Yeah.
And will they check the ties that you have to the country as well within that process for citizenship?
No, you just have to meet the living here criteria and be a tax resident. You have to pay your taxes.
This has been a very interesting episode about how, I mean, I'm sure there's many other options that we haven't touched on, but we really touched on some of those key options and how you can start getting into the immigration system in New Zealand. And then potentially for some who it sounds like an interesting lifestyle for, work their way towards citizenship. So where can the listeners find you online?
So I have a website, visavisa.co.nz, visavisa.co.nz. That's the way most people find me. One thing I get a lot of clients from, we have something called the Immigration Advisors Authority, IAA. IAA lists all of the licensed immigration advisors in New Zealand. So say, for example, one of your clients thought, okay, I want to move to New Zealand and I want to live in, so they would go onto the IAA website, put in the search box Christchurch, and it would list you all the licensed advisors that are available in Christchurch. And you could choose one maybe who speaks Chinese or Mandarin or speaks Portuguese or Spanish or whatever. So you can find an advisor who's best to help you. I get a lot of clients from, as I say, the website, but I would say the majority of my clients are from referrals, friends of friends of friends of friends. And obviously doing these podcasts and these webinars, these types of things, that really helps as well, because people can see me or they can hear me, and they want to get in touch with me as well. We do provide a free 15-minute consultation. So if anybody is thinking about coming to New Zealand or has any questions, please get in contact with me.
You've just listened to the Work, Wealth, and Travel podcast. If anything from this episode resonated with you, I'd appreciate if you share this podcast on your socials. And of course, be sure to tag us at Work, Wealth, and Travel. And don't forget to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining us on this global citizen journey, and we'll see you in the next episode.